Nthikeng Mohlele is a South African award-winning novelist whose novels include Michael K., Illuminations, and Small Things. This is The Black Librarian, and I am your host, Tulisile Matumbo. Thank you so much for your time and your patience with us. If you were to write an epilogue about yourself, what would it say?
It would be very brief.
Mm-hmm.
Born, lived, and died.
You wouldn't add roads there?
No, I wouldn't.
Tell me, when did you realize that you wanted to become a writer?
Well, I read Things Fall Apart, and it was kind of interesting for me that the whole world would be created that way.
Yeah.
Little did I know that it would take so long, and that the craft of writing is such a complicated life journey.
Take us through your journey of how you discovered literature.
I discovered literature through Things Fall Apart. It was just interesting what Achebe did with the book in terms of creating a whole world. And also indirectly, I discovered literature through motion pictures.
Absolutely.
From a storytelling DNA, motion pictures as in films and documentaries as well. So I had an inclination to tell stories, even though at such a young age then, at high school, I didn't know what particular route that would be.
You just spoke about having an inclination of how to tell stories. What do you think is a good South African story, or what encompasses a good South African story?
I think that's a very difficult and personal question, and I think that it would vary from individual to individual. But I think that in essence, stories that are good would be a story that resonates with someone who reads them, who creates the story, who interprets the story, or who can at least relate to the story, either on an emotive, intellectual plane, or just as a identity point of view. So there are many vantage points that a story can be said to be a good story. So I don't think that there is a one-size-fits-all answer to that. Yeah.
What do you think South Africans are avid readers? And if not, what can we do to better improve the way in which South Africans experience literature?
Well, I think that South Africans are avid readers. And, it remains to be seen in terms of the evolution of society, because there are many competing interests in our society. So one can say someone is an avid reader, but we're living through things such as technological innovations, for example, social media, for example, other life interests that happen as societies evolve. And there are different sort of tropes and periods in lives of a particular society. So to say people are avid readers, I'm sure that we're not readers as Charles Dickens and Shakespeare time per se, because societies have become more globalized, more plural, and there is much more to do in present times than only sitting and reading. But I think that there is some reading activity taking place in the country.
Speaking of the way in which humans have evolved and globalization and the effects of social media and the such, do you think that young people still use books as a means to influence the way in which they perceive themselves, the way in which they frame themselves? And I'm talking from experience. The first time I read a book, Eat, Pray, Love, I thought of myself as a woman who would then become a traveler, a writer, living in different parts of the world. So I'm just wondering if you think that young people use literature now to frame themselves.
I think yes and no. It's quite a dangerous question to answer, because it would need statistical samples or a litmus test based on me having spoken to quite a number of people. And young people are not a homogeneous group of people. So it's a little bit slippery in that if there is a young person who's more predisposed to visual arts, for example, and to music, or to motion pictures, it does not mean that that person is not culturally conscious.
Yes.
It could be that from a preference point of view, you get those young people that are more comfortable in the world of books. So to answer your question more specifically, there are those that are readers, but there are also alarming levels of ignorance in our young people, where people are very emotive and very expressive in the way that they see the world, but it's not based on fundamental engagement with information.
That's true. So I'm aware that some of your books are now being used as study material in universities, and I want to know what your thoughts are around the impact that authors have in each generation that they are part of.
It's an interesting question in that once you're living within that reality, the sort of conscious withdrawal from it and a reference point away from yourself is quite a strange thing. Because you part and parcel of your work. So the distinction that it is being studied and what have you, first of all, it's heartwarming, but it's a very strange reality to be fully conscious of, or to be able to have an interpretative stance about it.
Okay, so I just want to talk about one of your books, which is Illumination. And the reason I want to talk about it is because I want us to tie in the various influences that you draw from when you write each of your books. So maybe let's first discuss what influenced it. I read somewhere that it was your love for music that influenced Illumination. So I want to know, apart from your love for music, what else influenced you putting out Illumination?
I love music.
Yeah.
If I were not a writer,
you'd be a musician.
I would be a musician. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Whether I would be a good one is another thing altogether, but I would be a musician. So I think that the influences are varied because I don't look at music and literature in isolation from the totality of artistic disciplines. So I enjoy visual arts, for instance. I'm trained in the theater and in cinema, by the way. So my undergraduate studies and my majors were in dramatic arts and performance arts. So that relationship has been very influential in me trying to look at the different modes of storytelling, and not only the different modes of storytelling, but the cross-pollination between the different disciplines, and how each one can illuminate and heighten what is perceived. So I don't see art as mutually exclusive in any way. So it's a continuum for me.
Yeah. Speaking of art not being mutually exclusive, when you are a writer, you need to ensure that you are in one way published. We're not writing to keep our writings for ourselves. So I want to know, what has your journey been in far as finding a publisher, and how would you advise another young person who maybe has a manuscript and is looking for a publisher?
Well, the advice that I can give them is almost impossible to get published.
Ooh, okay.
Because it's a very difficult process because of the quality that needs to be in the work that you're soliciting a publisher for. But that is not a fait accompli, in that some writers are, well, talented and hardworking enough to be able to crack it with their first book and get it published. So, but that is is in rare cases. The journey of developing a writing career depends on so many variables, and you might have heard, or read elsewhere, where they say a writer has found his or her voice, for example, because storytelling is not only about putting words together and ideas and thoughts and emotions, and there's a certain register that is very personal and very particular to a particular writer that is different from writer A to B. Much the same way as visual artists or musicians that play particular instruments. No two pianists are the same,
Absolutely.
no two guitarists are the same, but the instrument is exactly the same.
Mm.
And the musical scale is based on exactly the same notes, but how they get interpreted is very, very different.
You seem to have a clear understanding of what would form part of the journey of a writer, right?
Mhm.
I'm just wondering, are you in any way mentoring other young writers or availing yourself to be used almost as a vessel of information? Because you have already done this, you've got a lot of titles under your belt and some award winning, some now used as literature for university students. So are you mentoring any writers?
Yes, I work with quite a number of people that reach out for writing advice, tips, and that kind of thing. I do read a lot of manuscripts.
Yeah.
And where possible, I'm able to, share what I have learned.
Yeah.
And it could either be right or wrong for that particular writer. So from that point of view of guidance, yes, I do that. And I recently now receive a lot of calls from students who maybe might be grappling with part of my work that has now become set works at different tertiary institutions. Be that as it may, it is very difficult and I think prudent and responsible to draw a line between a student that wants assistance because there is maybe an interpretative blind spot for them, and those that want free lunch. Yeah. So, and I try to make a distinction between the two.
Absolutely.
On who needs help and who is actually not going through their coursework in the way that they should.
Yeah.
And I think that is my responsibility as the owner of the work to draw the line to say, actually, for you to pass your course, you actually need to understand what you're studying. So I can't necessarily cross the line to a point of spoon feeding someone on what the book is about.
What has been the most surprising literary critic that you've read about your work?
All of them are surprising because they are two different disciplines, really. They are all, in their DNA, more premised on storytelling, if we were to look at it from that point of view. However, literary criticism is more academic.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, it's very technical and it follows certain rules of literary crit. It's peer-reviewed, it appears in journals. It frames a particular theme in a book, whereas the creative canvas from a novelistic perspective is much more, liberated, if we were to use that kind. But it's surprising, that you read these things and you're like, wow, I couldn't have thought of that,
It's nice for you to see your work outside of yourself.
Yes, it is. It's sometimes it's a very strange and awkward feeling, but actually you also learn from it because when you read that, it teaches you about your own work, things that you might not have been cognizant of or not be sensitized to.
In reading the critics about the work, has there been, and let's say for instance, you read a critic about Small Things, did it influence maybe how you wrote Rusty Bells or Pleasurable?
No, I had very good mentors very early in my writing life. So I don't pay criticism any, mind. Or I don't invest a lot of my time in that because I don't want to be influenced in terms of what I believe I should say in my work of art. And they fluctuate. So it doesn't really bother me whether it's a good review or a bad review. It doesn't change the register or my original thinking about a particular work that I'm working on.
Okay, speaking on work that you're working on, is there anything that you are working on right now that South Africa can be on the lookout for?
I am working on a number of projects. None of them are going well. But it's okay.
From the basis of you being a writer, they're not going well from there. Or perfectionist.
from a perfectionist
Yeah.
point of view. But perfectionist is relative.
Yeah.
You know, maybe sometimes laziness can masquerade as perfection. So,
Oh,
so it goes both ways.
it goes both ways. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So, if anyone is looking to engage with you outside of social media platforms, where can they engage with you?
Well, I'm on all social media platforms really.
Mhm.
Facebook, Instagram. I'm on Twitter as
Yes.
well. And people do reach out, inbox appropriate and inappropriate things.
Yeah.
But life is short, I suppose.
Yes. So, live your best life.
Yeah, that's it.
What are you hoping the legacy of your work will be?
I think it's a difficult and wide-ranging question in that it depends on the perspective of who would be interacting with that. But from an authorial point of view, as a creator and a writer of literary works, I think my responsibility is to write work that is of a certain quality according to the best of my God-given talents. And that work would represent me as what the legacy would be. And I'm just glad that I won't be there to be able to say it.
Okay, thank you so much, Nthikeng, for your time. Thank you so much to our viewers at home. And remember, guys, a reader lives 1,000 lives. So every now and again, grab a book. This is The Black Librarian with Tulisile Matung.